Big news, folks. Intel is back with their latest chipset, Lunar Lake chips, and everyone's asking the big question. Can Intel finally rival Apple's M3 and Qualcomm Snapdragon processors? Well, the verdict is in, and let me tell you, this might just be some breakthrough for Intel, and may really just need the juice, the mojo that Intel needs back to jump back into the fight. The performance benchmarks are in, and we're going to dive in deep into what these new chips means for developers, tech companies, and for you. So stick around because things are heating up in the chip wars. All right, welcome back to StartupHakk. I'm Spencer Thomason, and here at StartupHakk, we'd love to train software developers in our licensed coding boot camps and build custom software solutions. So I do a lot of work as a fractional CTO. With over a decade of executive leadership and a solid 25 years in software development, I've mastered the art of transforming technology, teams, and products. So let's talk today about Intel's Lunar Lake chipset, the big contender in 2024's chip battle royale. Can it really compete with Apple's M3 and Qualcomm Snapdragon X processors? Well, the short answer is Intel's finally stepping up their game after a string of forgettable launches. With improved performance, better power efficiency, and some killer benchmarks, it's looking like Intel might be back in the game. So Lunar Lake isn't just about raw performance. It's about balancing power with efficiency, which is what's hugely important today. Raw power is kind of a thing of the past. Like, I'm sure Intel could probably create a chip that would burn and beat all of the benchmarks, but it has to be able to do it while balancing efficiency because you can't burn through your battery life in 2 minutes. So that's something that Apple nailed with its M series processors, and it looks like Intel took some notes. So these new chips are running on Intel's next Gen 3 nanometer process, which means that they're super energy efficient while still packing a big punch. So if you've been frustrated by the power-hungry Intel chips of the past, these might just change your mind. Oh, and did I mention battery life? Yeah, we'll get to that next here. So let's talk about performance because that's what everyone really wants to know. In head-to-head benchmarks, and I'll show some of these benchmarks here in a minute, Lunar Lake does surprisingly well against Apple's M3 chips. We're seeing near parity in single-core performance with Intel's actual pulling ahead in some multi-core tests. Apple still edges out Intel in graphics performance, but Intel is closing that gap fast. So if you're on the fence about switching to Mac for development, maybe just hold off for a bit, right? Intel isn't just about taking aim at Apple. They're also going after Qualcomm Snapdragon X. Snapdragon has been dominant in the ultra-mobile space, but Lunar Lake is gunning for it with better battery life and similar, if not better performance in key areas like multitasking and general computing. So Qualcomm still has an edge when it comes to the integrated 5G, but Intel's making serious progress in closing that connectivity gap. Now, let's talk a little bit about battery life because this is where Intel's really going to shine, and that's pretty exciting for all of us Windows users, right? According to early reports and benchmarks, Lunar Lake chips offer significantly better battery life compared to Snapdragon X and even Apple's M3, and that's pretty exciting because we know Apple's always been awesome at the battery life game. So we're talking about up to 30% more battery life in certain configurations. Now, if you're like me and you're constantly on the go, then this is a game changer. And if your company has systems that aren't connected, make sure to hit us up here at StartupHakk because our specialty is connecting systems to help your company work like a well-oiled machine. So check out startuphakk.com/Spencer and we can help you out. Now, we're going to jump into some of these benchmarks here. So let me get switched over here because we're going to hit some of these benchmarks. And talk a little bit about these here. So let's talk a little bit about the construction of Lunar Lake here, right? So you've got the memory. This is the base package. You've got the compute tile, the platform control tile, the base tile, and looks like it's called furrows and stiffener, right? So lots of stuff all stacked onto this chip. This chip is pretty amazing, and these new modern chipsets are pretty awesome. Now, I'm not going to dig into all of the advertising stuff for it because we're here for benchmarks, right? So battery life. So PC Mark Modern Office, right? So this is 200 nits, and in this case, the higher is better. So we can see that the new Apple, the new chips are performing way higher, which is really good and really exciting, right? Because these new chipsets are running really, really high comparative to the other standards. So higher is better. So the good news is that Lunar Lake's battery life, at least in this Zen book, is quite good. It lasted for around 16.5 hours on a single charge. in the modern office battery life test. So just over 12 hours for a similarly configured Core Ultra 7. So that's pretty good, right? Like 16 to 12, 16-hour jump to 12-hour jump, or from 12 to 16-hour, pretty healthy jump. So that's pretty exciting, right? And that's with a pretty serious screen. So this is some pretty serious competition that's working against. Now, we see the multi-core and we see the single core on the Geekbench 6 CPU test, right? And so we can definitely see where the, so as for performance, it's mostly fine. It meaningfully improves over Meteor Lake's single core CPU performance where it's within range of the Snapdragon X and Ryzen AI. So we can definitely see that it's doing better, right? But it's, it still is at least in the running for these. Let's take a look at some of these here. So again, higher is better. So we can see that it's running much better here on most of these tests. Now, let's run back down here to our, the 3D Mark SPI, right? So GPU, right? So we got GPU, the CPU score, and then the overall score. And we can see that, on this, it's scoring really high, which is good, right? Higher is better. Now, some of the old framework ones might run slightly better, but it's still running pretty good considering the battery life too. And that's the other part you got to take into account here is the battery life in comparison with these. So definitely running really good on a lot of these benchmarks here. Now, for MP4 encoding, something that I obviously do a fair amount of here, this is really good to see these performance, and these are, lower is actually better on these ones, right? And so because we want to see lower render times. And so we can see that it's running really good in these cases, right? So Lunar Lake's power efficiency is also pretty good, though the exact numbers will vary a bit depending on how your specific laptop manufacturer configured the power settings. In their multi-core handbrake video encoding test, Lunar Lake ran behind everything from recent Ryzen to 12th gen, to say nothing of Apple's M3. But in standard performance mode, its power usage was low enough that it used less power overall to do the same work. And that, I think, is really kind of the big thing, right? I think gone are the days where people are going to be counting seconds, but they're going to be more worried about how much power it's consuming during that time. So pretty impressive benchmarking here, and it's a good, exciting time to see Intel is back into that game and really back into the fight with these benchmarks here, right? So Intel's Lunar Lake lineup is being led by the Core Ultra 200V CPU, which promises to blend performance and efficiency in a way that Intel hasn't quite nailed before. So early reviews suggest that Intel's Ultra 200V series is bringing a solid mix of performance for both everyday users and power users. This chip is a big deal, especially if you're looking to run heavy workloads without burning through your battery in a matter of hours. So developers and creators, listen up. While Apple's M3 series has been the darling of creative professionals, think video editing, 3D rendering, and graphics design, Intel's Lunar Lake is finally a legitimate competitor. Gamers and creators alike are finding that the Lunar Lake chips are holding their own in the heavy graphics workload, although Apple's M3 still has a slight edge with its integrated GPU. But here's the kicker. Lunar Lake isn't too far behind, and with Intel's upcoming driver optimizations, this gap could close faster than you think. So if you're someone who loves to multitask, and I know a lot of you are because you guys are all out there hustling, right? We're out there hustling every single day. I know all my listeners out there are developers, they're entrepreneurs, they're folks who are out there hustling every day. And so I know my crowd out there is hustling. And of course, best compliment you can always give me is to leave a comment down below. Just even if nothing else, to tell me, where you're listening from and just say thank you. That's the best compliment I can get. So if you're someone who loves to multitask, and I know you are, then Intel Lunar Lake is a powerhouse. One of the key advantages the Lunar Lake has over the competition is its ability to handle multiple intensive tasks simultaneously without breaking a sweat. So if you're running a dozen tabs on Chrome while coding in Visual Studio and running a few Docker containers, this chip is totally made for you. So let's get into the fine print here. While Intel's Lunar Lake holds its own in most of the benchmarks, there's still some areas where Apple and Qualcomm lead. Apple's M3 is still king in integrated graphics, and Qualcomm Snapdragon X leads with its 5G capabilities. But here's the thing. Lunar Lake is a well-rounded chip that excels in general computing and power efficiency. And if you're willing to give up a little bit in one area, you'll gain a lot in the other areas. So if you're a developer looking for a best overall experience, this chipset could be your sweet spot. So I'm super excited to get my hands on it. So now, why does all this matter? Why should you developers care? Well, the rise of the Lunar Lake means that Intel's back in the fight, and this means more competition. More competition leads to better products, better pricing, and more innovation. If you're a developer, this is great news because it means more powerful hardware options for you to code, build, deploy, video edit, and etc. on. Whether you're running resource-heavy applications or building cloud-based solutions where you need to run a lot of Dockers, you now have more choices than ever before. So it's happening sooner than we think. Major OEMs like Dell, Lenovo, and HP are already planning to integrate these chips into their next generation Ultrabooks. We're talking lightweight, ultra-thin laptops with some serious power under the hood. So if you're in the market for a new development machine, keep an eye on the Lunar Lake based systems because they're going to hit the market soon. So let's not forget, and I can't wait to get my hands on them. I want to try one of these. So let's not forget that this is part of Intel's larger comeback strategy. After years of getting overshadowed by Apple's M series and Qualcomm's innovations, Intel's making some pretty serious moves to regain its position as a leader in the semiconductor space. This isn't just a one-off. Intel is planning to build on this momentum with even more powerful chips in the future. If this is any indication of where they're heading, this is going to be an exciting time for developers because there's some good competition here. Every one of these three chipsets have some definitely a strong point. So it's good for these guys to be fighting. So here's the $1 million question. Can Intel beat Apple's M3 and Qualcomm Snapdragon X? So the answer is it depends. In raw performance, Intel is closing the gap fast, but Apple still has an edge in specialized areas like graphics and creative workloads. Qualcomm's holds its ground in mobile and 5G. However, if you're looking for an all-around workhorse chip that balances power, battery life, and versatility, Lunar Lake is looking like a serious competitor. So it's not about beating everybody in every single category. It's about offering a good, balanced approach. So what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I love having a great discussion. As I've always said, the best compliment you can give me is to leave a comment down below because I still answer all of my own comments. But so make sure to leave me a comment and like and subscribe. Here at StartupHakk, we love to train software developers in our licensed coding boot camps and to build custom software solutions for companies. So if your company has some systems that are disconnected, reach out, hit us up at startuphakk.com/Spencer because we'd love to help out. And otherwise, you can hit the links down below, and we will catch you guys next time. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel because we bring you lots of great tutorials and tips that every developer should know. See you next time.